Welcome to part two of Virginia's People Sold Downriver.
There's more to come with this discussion, and I'd like to bring in an additional guest, and that is Mr. Troy Vallos, who is the Director of Special Collections and the Sargent Memorial Collection at the Slover Library in Norfolk. And I'm going to invite Dr. Richmond to actually lead this discussion with him.
Good morning, Mr. Vallos.
Hey, good morning.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk. We worked closely together for the last 4
Yes.
years. So can you tell me a little bit about what ignited your interest on this topic and why you started working on this important project?
Uh, well, it started with a whimper. It started with a single question. Of course, our Dr. Cassandra Newby Alexander came to me when I was still working here years ago, and we won't say how long, but basically simply asked me, where was Hall's slave jail? That she had an advertisement that said, um, come see come to me at my slave jail here on Union Street. And she wondered, well, where was that? Of course, I was like, I don't know, but let me check and see what we can find. And as I started searching, eventually I did find where it was located, which was actually the northeast corner of current day Union Street and um, the northbound lane of the St. Paul's Boulevard. Um, so, and then it also, again, as a student history, having just recently completed my master's at Old Dominion, that I got curious about, couldn't find anything else about like Norfolk's role in the domestic slave trade. That when I started looking at the local text about our history, hardly nothing was ever mentioned about it. I think you were lucky enough to get, well, we knew there was a slave pen, or we knew that Solomon Northrop was aboard the Orleans, that he stopped here. They picked up a couple of slaves and they moved on. And so um, that curiosity, historical, of just trying to figure out to what extent is everything here. Um, and I will say, going a little parallel, a couple years prior to Cassandra coming in, that um, when I was recently hired, the library director at the time mentioned to me and my other coworker that our collection here is actually is more traditional Southern history, the Confederate lost cause history as a kind of a focus with the collection. That he recognized that we needed to ensure that we did what we could to help diversify, or at least build more connections into the collection so that people could see a fuller history of this region in this city. And so, and to one of the nicknames they have me here is the Bloodhound. So between all that, it was like, well, what can I find? And as I started digging, um, I started finding that Norfolk actually had sent the most enslaved by ship to New Orleans.
Okay. So can you tell us a
Whereas,
little bit about why Norfolk was such an important port?
yeah, so why? I think one, much as New Orleans was the gateway for the Mississippi and the Mississippi River and everything to the interior, Norfolk is also a gateway city, a gateway port. That everything coming out of Richmond, Alexandria, Petersburg, Baltimore, all has to come through Norfolk. A lot of times, some of the ships could go straight past us, and a lot of them did. But with Norfolk here, that it served as I said, a gateway. That a lot of the stuff could be brought here, put on ships, and with its proximity its geographic location along the eastern seaboard, where it's literally in the middle. So you could literally be in New York City in 2 days by ship, or you could be in Charleston or Georgia in like 2 days. And so it was easy for us to get people to other places quickly. And I think hence why switching to truck farming that in the 1800s, that proved to be, we had ready markets within 2 days of produce. So, but also too is that, and I would even say it's an important port because also the participants and its connections with history, like state, national, international, that our citizens actually played major parts in the stories of what we hear today of like Uncle Tom's Cabin, the Norfolk police officer who moonlighted as a fugitive slave hunter, basically got Harry Beecher Stowe, learned of him and his experience as a fugitive slave hunter, and used him as the archetype, as the poster child of what a typical slave hunter, and used him in her book. Of course, as I said, Solomon Northrop, so 12 Years a Slave. You also have some of the successful uprisings, slave uprisings aboard the ships, so the Creole. And then also you have Liberia, ships leaving from Norfolk to Liberia to start with the African American Colonization Society. So geographically, but also just importance to history.
So can you tell us a little bit about the records that exist and that we've been using to help find people who were sold from Norfolk?
So that is where things get quite interesting, is that in a way, there's hardly any surviving records, what we consider of receipts, ledgers, anything of that nature, that a lot of times, basically all the history I've been using, all the history that we've been creating basically has been built on deeds, property deeds. There's been maybe one or two slave sales that have been recorded in the deeds, newspaper accounts, newspaper advertisements, and then the slave manifests themselves. But also in looking at maybe some of the more untraditional, there's actually a small cache of records for Bernard Rowe and Paul Pascal that was actually saved up in Harvard. But in terms of our slave traders, and a lot of it is gone, or at least it's not here. It's probably buried in other collections and such.
Can you talk a little bit about the ship manifests and how we have been using them for this project?
Yeah, so the ship manifest, as I was mentioning before, is basically part of the core of how we've learned about all our individuals, how we can get to that 21,000 number. Is that the manifests themselves as a way to ensure that there are no native Africans being imported into the country because of the Constitution, that any people shipping enslaved people to other American ports had to file with the customs office, that just like a passenger's list, but it's a list of slaves, along with some of their basic demographics, vital statistics and such, but also listing maybe who's their owner up here, or who purchased them, who's shipping them, and then who is accepting them down in New Orleans. And so kind of building that list of one for the enslaved to be able to document um, their experience, their lives, but also two, building a list of people that are in the trade and also their connections, which hopefully, as any archivist and librarian will tell you, is that sometimes the records may not be with your specific individual you're looking for, but if you know who their partners or their friends or family, that a lot of times those records may actually pop up with them and be listed under them.
All right, can you tell us a little bit about some of the individuals who were involved in the slave trade here in Norfolk?
Yeah, so, and I want to say there's, we also kind of need to do a little bit of differentiating with the slave trade that you have. So the slave trade is overall the buying and purchasing of slaves, selling of slaves, in a sense, the transfer of the slaves from one owner to another. You have kind of like a resale market where people locally, John over in Princess Anne County needs to sell a couple of slaves. He may take them to a nearby one of the main inns or taverns at one of the big crossroads, or we'll take them to Norfolk and we'll sell the individual to someone else. You also have like the renting of the slaves as a market, but also too with the resale, you also have your auctioneers that, again, if someone has to settle someone's estate or just needs to raise money, they would sell, they will give their slaves over to auctioneers and let them auction them off. And then you also have the enslaved that were rounded up with the local courts, and two, either as a way to settle debts with court cases, or they have runaway slaves that no one has come to claim ownership, that they would then sell them at auction or sell them off the steps to the courthouse or some main location. But then when we start talking about the relocation of enslaved from Norfolk and from this region to New Orleans, then you have this big group of the transportation of the relocation. So again, a lot of times they tend to be families, two brothers or friends that will get into the business, maybe father and son, and that we've seen where we've had families from the French refugees from Haiti that would, as a way to make money, would start selling slaves, sending slaves to New Orleans. For people out of Louisiana, they would call them the Anglos, but the Americans, that some of them started seeing the profitability, and like Franklin Armfield and here it's George Apperson and William W. Hall and Bernard Rowe and Paul Pascal and Charles Hatcher and them, that they would buy up locally and then send to partners down in New Orleans for resale.
Well, thank you. Thank you for digging into this with us this morning. And do you have any last things you want to share about the project or its importance to Norfolk Public Libraries?
So I think part of why I think getting interested too is that within the last, say, 10 years or so, 15 years, we've seen more of an increase in individuals coming in, especially ones with an African-American heritage, coming in looking for either they're from the Deep South and they found references to ancestors and family from here, or likewise, they're from here, from this region, and suddenly maybe they get a DNA test that pops up. Hey, you got family descendants down in Louisiana, and so they've been coming to us looking for to try to help find those connections, and also just working with them, that you kind of see that there is a hole in their heart or a hole in their soul that they're trying to fill in, like where do I belong and how do I belong, and trying to make those connections that sometimes more people with the European uh, heritage tend to have a little bit better time finding those records and pulling that together. But I will say too is that I think the whole thing with the project too, the way I look at it is one, that I guess in the modern vernacular that we keep saying domestic slave trade, but again with the modern vernacular is that this is basically legalized human trafficking, and that looking at the manifest and seeing how it looks to be about in the 40%, 50% range where these enslaved are biracial. And so basically, in a sense, means that they have a European ancestry, which means that people from this region, that is their family members, being shipped and sold to places unknown. And so there's a humanity to it where it's that basically everybody, even with genealogies, everybody's important, and that everybody's story is important, and that you need to ground it in facts, ground it in figures, that that a lot of times these stories, they don't need to be narratized and made fluffed up into like almost a Hollywood production. But I mean, the stories are just as are powerful in themselves, and that when you start looking at the manifest and start seeing children that are from babies all the way up through their teens, and over and over and over, that or these women, young men and women being sent, that if you at least step back and go and just take it in, that these are young people that are, their lives are being shipped and sold for profit, and that their stories need to be documented, and as I said, to grounded in facts and figures, that so we know the true story type thing, and it's not, well, we think it's this type thing, but because I think ultimately that gives it more credence and weight to everything. That then it's like, oh no, it's not some abstract thing in a textbook. It's there's this person, there's that person.
Well,
so I think so which is part of the reason why, obviously, ensuring that trying to make this project keep moving forward.
Well, thank you. We couldn't do this project without you, Troy.
What you've said, Troy, really resonates with where we are as a society today. We're still in the throes of not really deciding who we want to be. Do we want to be a society that embraces all of our history, all of our past, or do we want to be a society that narrowly looks at what makes us comfortable? And this story doesn't make us comfortable, does it, Dr. Richmond?
Not at all. This is one of the things we talk about pretty regularly amongst the team, is how to handle the emotions that come with working on this project and recognizing the humanity of people who are being bought and sold and were considered to be commodities and not, children and neighbors and community members and people who worked hard and had lots of give, and were important to their families and their community.
Well, it's at this point I just want to pause for a minute and invite our representative from the Virginia Beach Cultural Affairs Division, Maddie Lang, to come and just give us a little message from them as one of our primary sponsors.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Newby. I just want to remind everyone that you are listening to the first in a series of 3 podcasts in celebration of our Black History Month theme, Blacks in Labor. In our first podcast, we are exploring how the labor was stolen to enrich the lives of thousands of people who left from the Norfolk port to a horrific slave system in the Mississippi River Valley. For more information on Virginia Beach Cultural Affairs and the Virginia Beach History Museums, please visit culturalaffairs.virginiabeach.gov or visit the historic Thorogood House Museum located at 1636 Parish Road in Virginia Beach. If you like this episode, please let us know and be sure to subscribe, share, or visit the show notes posted on WNSB Online. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Richmond. I would like to thank you and all of our guests, Troy Vallows, Alexander Traps-Jabala, and Yokota Strong, for participating in our important podcast. Your work is amazing, and your stories are absolutely riveting. I look forward to the release of your work. I also want to thank all of you, our listeners, for tuning into our podcast and discussion. And I'd like to end with an insightful statement from Winston Churchill. He said, "The farther backward you can look, the farther forward you are likely to see." Stay tuned for our next podcast.